Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Low-Key Chaotic. Season 1 is going to come to an end soon. I don't really know who determines what season, when the fuck do seasons even come to an end in the podcast world? I have no fucking idea. And also, I've been doing this for how many months have we been doing this for now? 8 or something? And I still don't have an intro song. I dead ass should make an intro song, shouldn't I? Anyways, how are you guys doing? I wanted to talk about Kinks today. I always have a list of topics. I said this last week, I don't need to say it again, but I always have a list of topics I refer to when I'm kind of uninspired and nothing strikes. But I'm the kind of gal that can't fucking talk about anything unless inspiration strikes. So this list never gets to see the light of day because every week I'm like, what is inspiring me? What do I want to talk about today? We're talking about sex, baby. We're talking about kinks. I think a lot of people use the words kink and fetish interchangeably, but they're actually not the same fucking thing. Because a kink is a broad term for any non-vanilla sexual interest or activity that enhances your pleasure. So it's something you like. It's a preference, right? And a fetish is more of a specific type of kink where the arousal is super strongly tied to a particular thing, like a non-sexual object or a body part or a very specific scenario. And for some people, that thing is essential for arousal. It's not optional. So basically, all fetishes are kinks, but not all kinks are fetishes. You know what I mean? A fetish usually involves a required thing, and a kink is more about an activity or a role or a dynamic. And I think that people obviously feel a lot of shame around both because we're taught that wanting things is embarrassing, especially as a woman. And you're supposed to be desired, but you're not supposed to desire. And if you do, you're either too much or too weird or too intense. But I don't think that desire is random, actually. I think it's information. I think it tells you something about how you relate to power and safety and intimacy and control. And once you start seeing desire that way, you realize that kinks aren't really about sex at all. They're about feelings. They're about who you get to be when you're vulnerable and who you're allowed to become in fantasy. And the reason why we're talking about kinks is because I don't know anything about fetishes. I don't have one. I think kinks are obviously also more broadly relatable because everybody has kinks. I think when people hear the word kink, they immediately think of something. I think also let's take it back to what even are kinks, right? Because I think that there is a lot of people out there that when they hear the word kink, they immediately think of something extreme or dark or niche. But a lot of things people are technically kinks. You know what I mean? A kink doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means you like something that isn't considered vanilla. So for example, some really common kinks are things like power dynamics. You like to be more dominant or you like to be more submissive. Some people like praise. Some people like being told they're doing a good job. I mean, who the fuck doesn't, right? Some people... Sorry, I just recently discovered my kink for appraisal. And I love it so much. I love being told that I'm doing a good job. Okay, anyways, some people like being taken care of. There's people that like being in charge or role play or uniforms or age dynamics, not in a literal way, but in an energy way. Some people like restraint. Some people like intensity. Some people like slow romantic intimacy. Some people like rougher energy. All of that falls under kink. And a lot of people have kinks and don't even realize that they do. They just think that that's their taste. And what's interesting is that none of these are random. They're usually connected to how you relate to power, to safety, to intimacy and control. Your brain is basically building fantasies out of your emotional wiring, out of your attachment style, out of your wounds, out of your needs, out of your personality. And that's why desire is so personal. And that's why it deserves curiosity and not shame. So if kinks aren't random, then the obvious question is, where do they actually come from? Because people love to say that kinks come from trauma. That's a very watered down mainstream explanation, but the reality is way more complex than that. There's no single cause why somebody has a kink. Like, desire can develop through this really complicated mix of biology, psychology, personality, experience, culture. And I think the more interesting question isn't what are you into? It's like, why are you into it? Because desire doesn't just appear one day fully formed. It develops. It gets shaped over time, right? Like, your brain learns, what does excitement feel like? What does comfort feel like? What does intensity feel like? What does being seen feel like? Long before sex ever enters the picture, because a lot of research suggests that the foundations of desire are already forming in childhood and adolescence. Not sexually, but emotionally and psychologically. Like, your nervous system is already learning what feels good and what feels safe and what feels thrilling and what feels meaningful. And then later in life, when sexuality develops, your brain builds sexual fantasy out of those earlier emotional experiences. And there's also like conditioning, right? Which means your brain links certain feelings and situations with pleasure. And once your brain makes that link, it tends to keep it. So maybe when you were younger, you loved being chased in games, or you loved being praised, or you loved being the center of attention, or you loved feeling protected, or you loved feeling special. None of that is sexual. That is an emotion. That is excitement. That is attachment. That is adrenaline. That is safety. And then later in life, your brain might eroticize those same feelings, not because something weird happened, but because your nervous system already knows those feelings as meaningful. You know what I mean? There's also people that are just like wired for intensity. There's a lot of research that suggests that certain personality traits, such as sensation seeking, make people more likely to be drawn to strong experiences, to adrenaline, to risk, to taboo, to things that feel charged. So for some people, kink isn't about damage, it's about temperament. It's about how their brain is wired to look for stimulation. And then, of course, there's trauma, which people love to blame for everything. But what's actually interesting is that kink is not automatically the result of trauma a lot of the time. In fact, actually, kink communities often report lower rates of abuse than the general population. That said, for some people, sexualization can be a coping mechanism, of course, like a way of turning fear into control, or shame into power, or like vulnerability into something chosen. And a lot of kinks are also about like control and release, right? Like, if you feel powerless in your daily life, you might crave dominance and fantasy. If you carry too much responsibility, you might crave surrender. If your life feels overwhelming, you might crave being held and contained. Fantasy is where the nervous system gets to rebalance itself. And of course, culture also plays a huge role. Like, what's considered kinky in one society might be totally normal in another. And now with the internet, people are discovering that the thing they thought made them weird actually has like a whole community, which is like comforting, right? And I think it's like nice that people can find each other and make each other feel seen and be part of a community, and it being part of their identity, etc., etc. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't know, that is a journey that I don't know how common it is for people to discover their kinks and then find out more about them and then accept it. I think that's kind of like, it's a good question. How many of you guys have like really gone on a kink exploring journey, and how does it make you feel? Have you accepted those kinks about yourself? Are you weirded out? I would love to know. It's very interesting. So when you really look at kinks, what we're figuring out is that they aren't random, and that they're not weird, and that they're not broken. They're a story about your personality, about your nervous system, about your history, about your needs, and the kind of intimacy your body understands. And when you like zoom out in most kinks, you start to notice the same themes over and over and over again. It's mostly always about power, control, vulnerability, safety, who holds it, who gives it up, who gets to let go, who gets to be held. And I think this is where a lot of people misunderstand kink. They think it's about domination or pain or humiliation or intensity, but really it's about trust. In real life, power dynamics are messy. They're unequal, they're unfair, they're unsafe. But in kink, power is contained, it's negotiated, it's chosen, it's consensual, and it has rules. And that's what makes it hot, because it's power without danger. It's control without coercion. It's vulnerability without abandonment. And a lot of people who like to surrender in fantasy are people who carry a lot in real life. They're responsible, they're independent, they're in charge, they hold everything together. So in intimacy, the desire to let go isn't weakness, it's relief. It's your nervous system finally getting to rest. And for some people, control is what feels regulating. It's grounding, it's stabilizing, it's reassuring. It's a way of creating structure in a world that feels so chaotic. And whether someone wants to give up control or take it, both are about feeling safe. And kink, I feel like, creates a space where vulnerability is allowed, where you get to show parts of yourself you're not allowed to show in daily life, and where you get to be needy or powerful or soft or intense. And that's real intimacy. Like, being trusted with someone's vulnerability is as intimate as it can fucking get. And that's why submission isn't actually about being powerless. It's about choosing to trust someone with your vulnerability. Like, it takes more power to surrender than it does to dominate, right? So when you look at Kinks this way, it becomes less dark, it becomes less scary, it's deeply human, it's just people trying to feel safe and seen and powerful and connected in a world that doesn't always give them space to feel those things. And for a lot of women, even knowing what you want in that space is hard, let alone saying it out loud. I remember on the first date with the last guy that I was seeing, we somehow ended up on talking about kinks. Honestly, probably because I asked. I'm like definitely someone who, I'm one of those people who talks about everything on the first date, like your past, your body count, your trauma, your childhood. I want to know it all because it's interesting. And because I love, like, I don't like playing these games of like, oh, we need to like get to know each other a bit first and like we need to trust each other first. No, let's lay it all out on the table and let's see if we're a match and let's keep it fucking going. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the point? I've never been someone to like hide anything about myself. I mean, that's why I have a podcast, but it's like, I'm such a fan of just raw and honest vulnerability. Like, what the fuck is the point in feeling ashamed about anything that you've experienced or felt or been through? Like, I feel like we should all talk way more about these things all the time, you know? Anyways, the conversation, when we started talking about kinks, the conversation turned to what I like. What is a kink I have? And I remember my body physically reacting. Like, I wasn't panicking, but I was kind of nervous and cautious and guarded, like as if something inside me was saying, be careful. And I remember that my brain also kind of froze. Like, usually I'm pretty aware of like what my kinks are. But in that moment, my body was so, I couldn't think. Like, I wasn't able to remember. And I realized, and then I just said something stupid, like, I don't know, I like it rough. Like, that's all that came out of my mouth. And which was like so, which was such an answer I was giving because my body was like kind of like nervous and cautious. And then I realized that this isn't because I'm ashamed of my desires. It's because I grew up in a world that taught me that wanting is embarrassing. Like, in my head, I know that there's nothing wrong with having a kink. There's nothing wrong with wanting certain dynamics. There's nothing wrong with curiosity. But my body didn't get the fucking memo. My body still remembers every message it ever got about being too much or too sexual or too needy or too intense, even in my last relationship. It took time before I felt comfortable saying what I liked. It took trust. It took safety. It took knowing that I wouldn't be judged or laughed at or made to feel small. And that's why I think the real foundation of good sex isn't chemistry. It's comfort. That's also why I've been so sad that this thing with the last guy ended, because in my head, I would have loved to explore that world with him. Like, I would have felt safe enough too. You know what I mean? I would have trusted him enough. There was chemistry, but there was also that feeling of just comfort. And when you lose that, you don't just lose a person, you lose the possibility of being fully yourself with somebody. And like, desire doesn't thrive in fear at all. It thrives in safety, 100%, and being seen and being accepted and being met with curiosity instead of judgment. And that's why for me, kink isn't about being wild, it's about being held. I think like a lot of women are far more curious than they let on, but curiosity needs safety. And until we create a world where women are allowed to want without shame, a lot of us will keep carrying that tension in our bodies. Men, they can have preferences and fantasies and kinks and fetishes and whole porn categories built around their desires, and that's just considered normal, right? But when women express desire, when women admit they want intensity, power play, surrender, dominance, praise, obsession, or hunger or whatever, suddenly it's a fucking problem. And then you have like, and then it's like degrading, and then it's anti-feminist, and then it's internalized misogyny, and then it's setting women back. That's like, remember that whole reaction to Sabrina Carpenter's album cover, A Man's Best Friend, where she was like on all fours and her hair was being pulled by a man, and the internet lost its fucking mind. People weren't just reacting to the image, they were reacting to a woman openly owning a submissive fantasy. And that's where I always said to people when everybody was freaking out and saying this is so misogynistic and it's setting women back and hello, 1950s, I was telling people that straight women are allowed to have kinks. Wanting to be submissive doesn't mean that you hate yourself. It doesn't mean you're anti-feminist, and it definitely doesn't mean you're powerless. Actually, in kink dynamics, the submissive is usually the one with the most power. They set the rules. They are the ones setting the boundaries. They decide when it starts and when it ends. The dominant only exists because the submissive allows it. I think we've definitely started expecting women's desire to be politically correct. Like, for sure. But desire is a feeling. It's not a manifesto. Like, the real problem isn't women having kinks. The problem is that women are still punished for wanting. We're taught to perform desirability, but not to own desire. You're allowed to want intensity. You're allowed to want softness. You're allowed to want control or surrender or both. You're allowed to want what you fucking want without it turning into a political debate. I think also that's why people are so infatuated with sex workers, because they shamelessly I feel like they shamelessly have ownership of their desire. Is it their desire because they're there to perform a fantasy for someone else's desire? So maybe that isn't the same thing. I don't know. That's interesting. But you sometimes meet those people. You sometimes meet people where you can tell they're in full control of like they just know themselves. They know and they own their sexuality. And I think I'm always so impressed and infatuated because it takes strength to be a woman that isn't ashamed to like what she likes and that just owns it. And you don't meet those kinds of people very often, which makes total sense going by everything we just spoke about. I feel like also owning your desire means knowing your boundaries, right? Which, to be honest, let's talk about my boundaries for a sec, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, what is the difference between choosing a desire and repeating a pattern? Like, the last guy that I was dating, he once asked me something that really stuck with me. He asked me if I liked being slapped because I had been in an abusive relationship before. And I remember being a bit taken aback, but also then thinking that's actually a really interesting question. And I had never thought about it because how much of desire is wiring and how much of it is memory? How much of it is fantasy and how much of it is familiarity? I think there's a difference between choosing a dynamic because it genuinely turns you on and repeating a dynamic because your nervous system thinks that's what love feels like. Like, when you've been in a relationship where intensity and fear and chaos were mixed with intimacy, your body can start confusing those things. Like intensity can feel like chemistry, and control can feel like safety, and pain can feel like closeness. So I think part of growing up is learning to ask yourself, do I want this because it excites me or because it feels familiar? And I think that's one of the hardest parts of healing, is like realizing that just because something turns you on doesn't automatically mean it's good for you. Like just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's what you actually want. And your nervous system, as we've spoken about quite a bit on the pod recently, it doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about what it recognizes. Like it will pull you towards what it knows, not what's healthy. And sometimes growth means sitting in this discomfort of something new instead of chasing the chaos that you're used to. So for me, this whole question of desire has become less about judging myself and more about getting curious, about learning my patterns, about noticing what my body reacts to, and asking why. Because the goal isn't to kill desire, it's to understand it. And once I started looking at my desire this way, I also noticed that like not all desire has to feel charged or like intense and chaotic. Like there's another kind of desire that feels completely different in my body. And that's where praise comes in, because praise isn't actually about sex. It's about being seen. It's about approval, safety, validation. It's about feeling chosen. And I feel like it's the part of me that just wants to know I'm doing okay and that I'm wanted and that I'm enough and that I matter to someone. And honestly, it makes so much sense for someone like me because I'm ambitious and emotionally deep and sensitive and driven and reflective. I'm someone who thinks a lot and feels a lot and carries a lot. So I'm not craving domination. I'm craving recognition. And it is one of the hottest feelings ever to feel understood. Like, I mean, I've been desired by men before. That's not new. But being understood, being met with curiosity instead of judgment, that is so fucking hot and so rare for God knows what reason. Like, I think it actually takes like a lot of confidence to create a space where someone feels sexually safe. I think a lot of men just do what they've been taught in bed, right? Like whatever they watch in porn, whatever. But taking that extra layer and actually making sex about making each other feel seen, that takes trust and that takes time to build. And that's something I realized with the last guy that I was seeing, because it's not like I was instantly fully myself sexually. It's not like I immediately felt free to explore everything. There was still caution and there was still like holding back. But he was like the first person that I was regularly seeing since my abusive ex-boyfriend. And that's like a long fucking time, bro. Like that's a long time that I wasn't seeing somebody regularly sexually. That's a long time. That's so many years. And it just put into perspective for me how comfortable I had been with my ex, because the way I was with him in bed, I wasn't like that with this new guy. Not because the new guy made me feel unsafe, not at all, but because just this real safety just takes time. It takes consistency. It takes familiarity. It takes knowing someone. I trusted him as a person and I felt comfortable with him, but I still didn't know him long enough to fully let go. And I know it would have taken me another month or two to feel completely at home in my body with him and to be as open and as free as I was used to being. And but it's kind of sad because like my ex is definitely a tad misogynistic, and I mean a tad is crazy. He's misogynistic as fuck, and it's interesting to me that I was like super comfortable with my ex and I didn't have any like caution or shame when it came to anything sexually, but he was not the perfect partner to explore anything with because he just isn't like that. Like he doesn't want to explore things. Like he's very like safe with like the normal rough sex dynamics. You know what I mean? And I think he just grew up as like a person who also doesn't like to like explore. Do I say all of this shit? Is this bad if I say this on the podcast? I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I felt comfortable with my ex, and I was like, I wasn't afraid of, like, there was nothing holding me back, okay? There was nothing holding me back with my ex because I knew him and we were sleeping together for a long time, whatever. But it's sad that I couldn't let down my full guard with this new guy, because it would have been like so much more exciting with him, and so much like I would have gotten so much more out of it, because he was somebody that I could have like explored a whole world with that I would have never explored with my ex, because my ex is just kind of like sexually like conservative. I don't fucking know what to call it. I don't know what to call it. But what I'm essentially saying is like not even just in sex, in general, kind of like I want to get more comfortable with letting down my guard and not being so overthinky and scared and afraid. I'm so afraid of rejection, of not being accepted for who I am, that I feel like I pre-edit myself and I always overthink. Like before I say something, I think about what someone's reaction is going to be to what I'm going to say. So then I don't be fully authentic and honest, and I say something based on someone else's, what I think someone's reaction will be. That's how scared I am of letting go. You know what I mean? And that reflects itself in my daily life, at work, in my friendships, in my relationships, in sexually too. Like, what am I afraid of? Why didn't I just fully let go? And like, what am I so scared of? Why am I so scared of being perceived? It's just really interesting. All of this is so interesting. And I kind of forgot where I wanted to take this now. Being understood. Once you experience being understood, I feel like you realize how empty just being wanted can feel. Because like being desired is about your body, but being understood is about you. And I think that was like a whole nother layer to all of this that I only understood like in hindsight, because when I met the guy that I was entangled with recently, that y'all have heard everything about, I remember like going home, like after our first date, I remember going home and feeling kind of intimidated, because he was clearly a man who knows what he wants sexually, emotionally, just in general. And for some reason, that always triggers something in me, because there's a part of my brain that goes, okay, you're only on this date because he wants to fuck you, and you're just a body, and this is just about sex. And it takes me a second to regulate that trigger and to remind myself that yes, sex is a part of dating, but it's not just that. It's also about connection and being curious about others and intimacy and closeness and building something with someone. And I remember asking myself, am I intimidated because he's confident in what he wants? Or am I projecting the patriarchy onto him? Am I projecting all the stories we've been taught about men and sex and women's bodies? Because at the end of the day, sure, all of it is kind of connected, but what is interesting is that there was also something that just like really enticed me about him. Like, I think it's because I'm attracted to people who know who they are, who know what they want, and who are grounded in themselves. Like when I went on a date with a different guy around the same time, with a guy who was like physically more my type, but I could just tell he didn't have the same experience, the same confidence, the same ease with intimacy. And even though the other guy was technically more my type on paper, I was more intrigued by the one who felt more emotionally and sexually grown. And I think that's because what I actually want isn't just desire, it's guidance and safety. And it's someone who recognizes that I'm scared and that I'm cautious and that I carry shame, and who's willing to hold my hand and walk into that world with me. Not drag me, not rush me, but meet me. You know what I mean? So I think that like mix of emotions I felt, the intimidation, the attraction, the fear, the curiosity, that was me growing. That was me learning to separate my trauma from my desire, and my conditioning from my intuition, and learning that I'm allowed to want someone who feels steady, someone who feels confident, someone who feels safe. And because I am scared, I am afraid, I have an anxiety disorder, like I'm afraid of being rejected and not accepted and I'm afraid of that I'm not good enough and that I'm not hot enough and that no one will ever want me and that I'm gonna fucking die alone. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that like when it comes to exploring sex and opening up to a man, being naked with him, being intimate with him, cuddling with him, sleeping with him, that's like one of the most vulnerable things you can do with somebody, right? And I think my fear of doing that with people comes from my fear of like not being good enough and not being accepted and not being rejected and my fear of being perceived, etc. Because everything that happens on the surface level when it comes to how I dress and the things that I say on social media and the things that I say in public and how I carry myself in the outside world, all of that I can control. But when it comes to sex and when it comes to naked bodies, it's like, sure, there's a sense of control there too. You can control like, you know, how your body looks based on like how well you're eating, how much you're working out, plastic surgery. You can decide how you groom yourself, etc., etc. But it's so easy to hide your insecurities under clothes and under makeup. And it's so easy to step outside into the world and leave your insecurities at home. But then when you're at home with somebody and you're naked and you're together, it's nearly impossible. Like your insecurities are just laying there bare. And I'm not just necessarily talking about physical insecurities. It's like when you're in that state with someone where you're so close and you're just like lying there together, you like see everything about this person because it's like the guard is like not there or like kind of at least a little bit down. And since in dating, you try to present yourself from like your best side and you showcase like the best version of you because you want to be picked and you want to be chosen. When you get to those levels with people where you're intimate with them and you're lying naked in bed together and you start seeing people for who they really are and you unmask and you reveal all the layers that like come with you and you reveal all the layers that you're made of. It's just really nice when a person then continues choosing you after you've revealed all of that. You know what I mean? Because I feel like dating is sometimes, it feels like it's such a performance. Like, sure, you are showing a part of you, but you're not showing all of you just yet. You mainly start showing all of you when you feel safe and when you feel chosen. And I'm just really grateful that I got to be reintroduced into the world of dating after years of being afraid of sex and of men because of my abusive ex-boyfriend. I'm just grateful that I met someone who I feel like saw that I was scared, but it didn't scare him off. He just held my hand and like took me with him. You know what I mean? And that is so beautiful. And that is all I want from love is to be with somebody that still wants me even after they see all of me. And I'm getting emotional. And I think that's what we all want, right? That's why dating is so scary. That's why love is so scary. That's why it's probably smarter to not even like put pressure on yourself to have to present yourself from your best side while you're dating. Because if you just like, I mean, I get it, because if you don't want to trauma dump and you don't want to scare someone off by showing them all of you on like the first 2 dates. But at the same time, I think I'm so used to masking and I'm so used to only unmasking when I'm at home. And since I had a man here that I was intimately involved with for the first time in so many years, it was just like kind of a sacred experience to me, because I rarely ever let people into like my cave and I rarely ever unmask with people. And it was just nice to feel seen and safe and beautiful and have a dynamic with somebody that I felt like I could trust. But to take the conversation back to kinks, what did I want to say? What the fuck have I not said yet? Oh, I think like I think it's interesting when you get to a place with somebody where you're exploring each other's kinks, because like I don't know what I would do if I was dating a guy who has a degrading kink, and I don't mean that he wants to be degraded. I don't think I would mind that. I think it would actually kind of be fun to degrade a man. But I don't know if it would be fun to degrade a man that I love, because I think I wouldn't mind being a dominatrix for a day. I could do it, apart from like, I don't know, I could like degrade them verbally. I don't know if I could like piss on them though. I don't know if I think my anxiety wouldn't let any pee come out, like literally. But I wonder what it's like to date someone that you love and then they have a kink, a degrading kink, like they want to degrade me. And then how do you find like a common ground? Because I am not into that at all. Like if you want to call me a dirty little whore, I couldn't do it. I would be like, what the fuck? Like I can't. That's like such a no-no for me. But then how do you find like a middle ground of like giving them what they want without it like crossing your boundaries? That's also really interesting. I don't know. I've never been in a position like that before. And I guess maybe because since kinks are not fetishes, maybe this is stuff that's very like negotiable and like you can kind of figure it out, because it's not something somebody relies on to get horny. So maybe you can just leave things out. Like if somebody has a kink, but that kink crosses your boundary, then whatever, you just never, include this kink ever again. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's interesting. I think that at the end of the day, desire is kind of complicated. It's memory and history and fantasy and attachment, and I think it deserves curiosity and boundaries. And I feel like the sexiest thing you can bring into a dynamic is knowing exactly what you want and what you don't. You know what I mean? And what you want doesn't mean you have to specifically know what you're into. You can also just know that you want to explore. You know what I mean? And I think the biggest thing I've learned is that desire is so personal, and it's shaped by, I don't know, our history and our nervous systems and attachment styles and experiences. And that means it's never going to look the same for everyone. And what feels safe and exciting for one person might feel overwhelming or wrong for someone else. And I feel like owning your desire is not about being wild or fearless or extreme. It's just about being honest with yourself and with your body. And like, you deserve safety and trust and a dynamic that allows you to explore all the things you want to explore, I think that's all I got for Kinks today, y'all. I love you guys. I'm going to see y'all on the pod next week. You know where to find me. Low-Key Chaotic Podcast everywhere. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Toodaloo.